So now we're going to talk about the sign of Aries. We've already talked about the sign of Taurus and the Deacon constellation, or supporting constellation, Orion, Eridanus, and Auriga. So now the next constellation that we're going to look into and examine is the sign of Aries, including Aries deacons as well. Aries is surrounded by his three deacons, Cassiopeia, Cetus, and Perseus. We're also going to look at that head of Medusa, which is in Perseus' hand, which some would consider a constellation in and of itself, but it really is belonging to Perseus. And so we're going to consider that also as we consider Perseus. If you have not been following along in this study, I would recommend that you listen to the teachings we've already done on the sign of Taurus and Orion, Eridanus, Auriga. Because the way we've put this together, I believe it's the way God would have had us moving by the Holy Spirit to do so. It's not absolutely necessary. You can continue on with the study in Aries here as we look at this constellation and then go back to pick up Taurus. That would be fine. I said in the beginning as we started this study in Taurus that it doesn't really matter where you begin, which major sign you begin at. Oftentimes others will begin at Virgo and end at the sign of Leo. But this is not the way the Lord directed us to begin, and we stated that in the beginning of the constellation Taurus. So now without further ado, let's get into this study on the sign of Aries, because we do have a lot to cover. Within the Egyptian zodiac of Dendera, the constellation Aries is called by the name Temetaurus Ammon, which means the reign, the dominion, or the government of Ammon. In Hebrew, it was simply called Taleh, which means the lamb, and in Arabic, it was called Al-Hamal, which means the sheep, the gentle, and the merciful. And then there's an Akkadian name, which it was called, which is Bar-Zigar, which name is derived from the two words bar and zigar. Bar meaning altar or sacrifice, and zigar means right making. So the name Bar-Zigar would mean, when the two words are put together, the sacrifice of the righteousness, or sacrifice of righteousness. The chief star located in the forehead of the ram is called El-Nath, which means wounded or slain. And another star located in his left horn is El-Shiratan, which means the bruised and the wounded. Still another star is called Mesartem, which means the bound. It is especially significant that during the very year and on the exact day of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, it is known that the sun stood still within the sign of Aries, directly upon the very spot marked by the stars El-Nath, the pierced, the wounded, or slain, and El-Shiratan, the bruised or wounded. This parallels Isaiah chapter 53, verses 1 through 6, which we're not going to get into right now, but you can look that up later. The figure represented in the sign named Aries is that of a ram, having a fleece or coat of glittering gold. Although within the Greek myths it was taught that this ram also had wings, it is interesting that at least within the zodiac it is never depicted as having wings. This ram was especially associated with Zeus, also referred to as Jupiter by his Roman name. It was in the form of a ram that he was metamorphosized in the day when Typhon, the enemy, had invaded Olympus and all the gods fled in terror. Each of the gods had changed their shapes that they might hide themselves from the monstrous Typhon, until they might have time to regroup and afterwards devise a plan that would eventually end in the defeat of the monster. It is well known that long before the Greeks had invented their own myths, this ram represented the Euphratean god Tammuz, being called Tammuz Dumuzi, whose name means the only son of life. There have been many references to the sign of Aries as well as to the star named Hamel located within the head of the ram, to be found within the ancient cuneiform inscriptions belonging to the Euphrateans. Now, according to the interpretation of these inscriptions, the ram was properly called Dilkar, the proclaimer of the dawn, and Dilgon, the messenger of light. According to the Greek myths, the ram first appears just before the offering up of Perseus as a human sacrifice. Athamas had sought to ward off a famine by offering up his son Perseus. Ino, his second wife, had cleverly convinced the king that unless he would offer up the beloved children of his first wife to Zeus, the famine would be certain and inevitable. That first wife's name was Nephel. To help ensure that Athamas would fall for her scheme, she later persuaded some of the peasant women to parch the wheat of the field so that, in all appearances, it might appear to the king that the crops were failing miserably. Finally, to further guarantee success, this same Ino bribed certain messengers, instructing them to pretend to be messengers sent directly by the oracle at Delphi, pretending to have a special message directly from Apollo himself for the king. So through a handful of false witnesses, the king became absolutely convinced that his beloved son Perseus must be sacrificed in an attempt to appease Zeus. As Athamas was about to sacrifice his son to Zeus, we are told that Hercules appeared on the scene and snatched the sacrificial flint from the king's own hand, thereby attempting to save the life of Perseus. Now, during all this confusion, Hermes also sent forth Aries from heaven. This action allowed both Perseus and his sister Helle to climb upon the back of the ram in an attempt to make their escape. As the ram had ascended into the heavens, it was very unfortunate for his sister Helle, who lost her grip and sadly plunged to her death. Now, after he escaped, Perseus sacrificed this ram in gratitude to Zeus. The golden fleece of this ram was afterwards presented to the king, who responded by giving Perseus his daughter to marry. One of the Deacon constellations of Aries is the constellation Cetus. It appears in the zodiac of Dendera as simply the eye of some sort of monster. The constellation Cetus represented that great sea serpent sent forth by Poseidon to devour Andromeda and to punish the inhabitants of Joppa. In more ancient times, it had been identified with the Euphratean Tiamat. Now, Tiamat is merely that ferocious monster who is also named Hydra, Draco, and Serpens. In appearance, the Greeks had visualized Cetus as a type of a hybrid creature having enormous gaping jaws while having the feet of some sort of land animal. Its long serpent-like body is covered with large scales while having massive coils. Tiamat, or Cetus, if you will, is said to be the embodiment of the sea goddess Ishtar, who is noted for being responsible for sending the great flood that covered the earth. Marduk could only conquer her after she had been chained to a rock. The chaining of this serpent is said to have annulled her magical powers. Hercules, who is the same as Marduk, being equivalent in the myths, was able to defeat this monster by jumping down her throat, which apparently represented his being in the grave for 3 days and nights. And following that third day, Hercules reappears triumphantly. In this way, Hercules is said to have defeated this great monster from within her own belly. Within the Egyptian zodiac of Dendera, the same constellation is known by the name Knem. or nem, which means subdued. The monster is represented as being trodden underfoot by the swine. The swine is considered to be the natural enemy of the serpent. Upon the head of the swine sits the hawk, also a natural enemy of the serpent. This figure wears a mortar for a crown that is believed to represent a sign of bruising. Now, this star located in the neck of the monster is named Mira, which means the rebel. Another star located in the monster's tail is named Diphda, which means overthrown or thrust down. The beast can easily be identified with the same being or creature that the Bible calls by the name of Satan, that deceptive dragon or serpent who deceives the whole entire world. The brightest star within the constellation is named Menkar. This star is located in the upper mandible, and the star means the bound or chained enemy. The scriptures declare that this is the eventual fate of this being, responsible for causing and leading the great rebellion in heaven. That rebellion resulted in a continual war between the forces of light and darkness throughout the many eons of time. Within the scriptures, we discover that Satan likewise will be chained with a great chain and cast into prison. The chain likewise renders his magic to become void of power. Within the Scandinavian myths of Asgard, it is Loki, the great trickster and deceiver, who also has great magical powers, and his magical powers were so great that at times he was able to even deceive both Thor and his father Odin. Now, after the gods of Asgard learned that the death of Balder was a result of the treachery of Loki and his magic, he was carried off to his prison within the ancient caverns located under the earth, where Loki had been bound with great chains, being himself continually surrounded by many serpents and various kinds of loathsome creatures who had also been suffering some kind of corruption and decay. Within these dark caverns, bound by the great unbreakable chains, Loki is forever tormented. His torture is the result of their poison, which continually drips upon his face from out of the mouth of the venomous snakes, serpents, and other poisonous creatures. And as the poison drips upon his face, Loki's body reacts in great pain and agony, causing his muscles to expand and contract convulsively. As his body reacts in convulsions, being a direct result of his great pain and agony, his arms continually pull against his chains, which ends are also fastened to the very foundations of the earth. The resulting effects of his agony can easily be measured upon the earth's surface by the various earthquakes that are felt throughout the earth. Within the scriptures, there are many references to the serpent, which is that great dragon known as the deceiver and Satan himself. We have Leviathan, Rahab, Tanim, Lucifer, Satan. These are just a few of the references or names pertaining to this great creature. You can see some of these in Genesis chapter 1, verse 21, Psalms chapter 104, verses 24 through 6. According to the scriptures, God had originally created this creature Leviathan with only good intents to play and rejoice within the earth. There is no mention of anything negative here about his fall or his end. He was made to play and rejoice in the earth among other creatures living upon the earth. The Word, the Son of God himself, that is, also enjoyed playing in the earth, delighting to be among his creation. Leviathan was created to play